Next speaker is Don Hancock. Don is the Director of Nuclear Waste Program for the Southwest Research and Information Center in Albuquerque. Don is widely recognized as a policy expert on nuclear waste and has helped empower communities to effectively participate in government and corporate decisions that affect them. And we're so grateful that he's here with us tonight. Please welcome Don Hancock.
Thank you all very much. I've been involved with Department of Energy and nuclear waste sites for more than 40 years. So I really want to tell you how many meetings somewhat like this I've been to all over the country about at and around Department of Energy sites and with community people like you who ask very basic, fundamental questions and deserve very straightforward answers. And I'm, as a citizen of the United States and a frequent critic of the Department of Energy, I must say that I'm ashamed that year after year and decade after decade, the Department of Energy continues to make similar mistakes, not be straightforward in terms of what they're doing, what they can do, and even importantly, what the laws are that relate to their activities. So I want to be very brief because I'm sure some of you have some questions in addition to wanting to do something other than sit down. This borehole project didn't make sense a year ago when Battelle, one of DOE's contractors, had a contract to do it first in North Dakota and then in South Dakota. And people in North Dakota and South Dakota said, no. So DOE, if at first you don't succeed, you try it again and spend even more taxpayer money. Going from one company, one contractor, Battelle, to, as you've heard, to 4 contractors at 4 different sites, 2 in New Mexico, 1 in South Dakota, and 1 in Texas, hoping you will find 1 or more communities that will say yes. It's a bad idea. Ed mentioned earlier the report of January 2016 by the Nuclear Waste Technical Review Board. This is the independent board set up 30 years ago of independent scientists from around the country whose job is to look at and evaluate the scientific and technical basis of DOE's nuclear waste programs. And they said it more nicely than the way I'm going to say it, but they said this borehole research project any place makes no technical sense. You also heard it talked about tonight, the 2012 report, the Blue Ribbon Commission on America's Nuclear Future, looking at what the Department of Energy had done with nuclear waste itself and its plans to try to develop repositories, whether it's in Yucca Mountain or proposals in the 1980s in Texas. And we've got a couple of folks, Tanya and Dale Kluskens, who were involved in the communities that fought and beat those proposals. But and the commission was 15 people, all pro-DOE. The New Mexican on the Blue Ribbon Commission was former Senator Pete Domenici. And that commission unanimously found that the Department of Energy has so messed up dealing with nuclear waste and trying to cite research sites and disposal sites that they should no longer be in that business. That instead a new agency should be set up to deal with nuclear waste because the Department of Energy didn't have technical or public credibility to do this. So it's the wrong agency doing the wrong project that makes no sense. But that then leads to some pretty obvious questions, some of which have been raised tonight, but let me take a little different look at them. So I mentioned they failed last year to find a borehole project site like this one in North Dakota and South Dakota. So they've now gone to 4 contractors. So what are they thinking? Well, one of the things that the Department of Energy is very good at is spending taxpayer money. And they like to spend it on contractors. And as you've heard, some of the companies that have gotten these 4 borehole contracts are companies that do have other bigger contracts with the Department of Energy. So on the one hand, a little more taxpayer money is good, but they also always hope that there will be bigger projects coming later. So again, that's from a taxpayer standpoint, from a scientific standpoint, that's not a good reason to be going forward with these kinds of things. Another important point, though, that I want to make is, so if you say no, will they actually go away? What happened last year? They went to North Dakota saying they had local support there. The local folks said, no, you don't. So they had to leave. Went to South Dakota, said they had local support. The local folks said, no, you don't, and they went away. If you say, no, you don't want them here, they will go away, I believe. But here's the important point. When you talk about consent, the law does not require the Department of Energy to have consent to cite a nuclear waste site. In fact, the law is actually the contrary to that. And you've heard tonight about Yucca Mountain, the one disposal site that has been chosen, Yucca Mountain in Nevada, is a technically flawed site. The law said the state of Nevada could veto the Yucca Mountain site, which the state of Nevada did in 2002. That's a pretty strong non-consent. But what does the law also say? That the federal government can overrule what the state of Nevada or anybody else says. So, on the one hand, the Department of Energy understands that because of the last 30 years of experience, including with folks in Texas who said no, even though they knew that the federal government had the power to try to override that, they were able to get them to go away. So that's still the case. So the good news is your involvement and being here tonight and writing your letters and making your phone calls does make a difference. So I encourage you to do that. And the other thing that is true, and as I say, I've been at lots of meetings in the communities where DOE does have the kind of major nuclear waste facilities that you're talking about. They were never asked at Hanford, Washington, or the Idaho National Laboratory in Idaho, or the Savannah River Site in South Carolina, or the Oak Ridge Reservation in Tennessee, or for that matter, Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico, and other places. They were never asked, do you want to be a nuclear waste site? But they are nuclear waste sites, and they know they have been for generations and will continue to be for generations because the problem is great. It is in some cases beyond the technologies that we have to try to clean up the contamination. The best that can be done, and what needs to be done better and more, is to keep the waste as safely as possible, as close to where it is, so it doesn't get put on the highways and the railroads. But I encourage you to understand that there are real people in other communities that are dealing with these problems. And the good news is most of those people actually don't want you to have to go through what they've gone through. So I think there's a very great commonality that people should understand, that we do want to protect our families, our kids, our grandkids, as you've heard tonight. And people in other places, other Department of Energy sites, want to do that as well. And they don't want to wish on you the kind of pain and suffering, and in some cases sickness and death, that they've gone through as workers or even as families of sites. So they don't want communities to be nuclear waste sites. You don't want to be a nuclear waste site. Thank you.